repositioned as different aspects of my trajectory were kind of highlighted and foregrounded. And the stable working class identity that I'd invested in my enactment with other working class academics was constantly undermined within process of being classed by my participants. I was restoried as in need, as these disparate parts of my trajectory were narrated together and classified me as poor. And although this classification was informed by dominant discourses of deserving and undeserving and respectable and not respectable, which positioned me as the latter in most of those, and these ideas were always troubled and mediated through effective relationships. And it was this unexpected classification, but also the kindness with which I was treated, that shaped my research focus on the processes of classification that occurs on the estate, and specifically the entanglement of the use of these dominant discourses with everyday enactments of livable lives. And so I just wanted to share one example of this with you, and so I've just put a field note on the slide. I'll read it out. And so this is an example of the practices of gift giving within the community centre, which was on the estate where I did the ethnography. So Sharon seemed completely exasperated with the multiple leaning towers of ham that filled her fridge. "You have to take some of these," she said to me. "I don't know what to do with them." And she was really pleading with me at this point. "I'm sure that your mum can use them up." And here, gifts are often in the form of food and other essentials like toiletries. And as such, the recipient is always overtly defined as in need. Yet the narrative that's provided by the giver allows a renegotiation of need by both the giver and the recipient. So the giver may be conceived of as in need of the recipient to accept. You need to accept this gift. And in this field note, Sharon must negotiate the deeply effective consequences of classification. Her relocation of need is fundamental to me accepting the gift. It's in this way that I think of gift-giving practices the key to the production of livable lives. Gifting within the community centre demonstrates the processes through which the material conditions of the estate or material conditionality of being working class are inherently mediated through practices which resist, subvert and reform meanings. And I'm sorry that was a slight tangent, but I think my point in it was to claim that to be working class, like any identity claim, is always a claim to power. So the power to claim a working class identity may be in relation to an unworking other, as it was for many of my study participants, or for us academics, is a claim that's enabled by our accumulation of resources, social, cultural and material resources. So classification, I think, draws our attention to the consequences of such claims. And it is this making of class in moments of classification that we feel, that's the effective moment of being class, moments which position us as beyond, like Valerie says, the class which is invisible to itself.
The second theoretical intuition we want to open up is the notion of refuting class as reification. I think for all of us ex-working class women who became academics, the fury we felt at the elision of working classness with intellectual lack kept us busy in our own productivity. We damn well showed them. But additionally, and this is the big but, I don't think ever want to let go or get over my roots. Part of the reason for this relates to a shared concern with the failure to think working class as critically capable. But it inspires our work, I think, and keeps us strong in moments of self-doubt and the many doubts that fall on our head. One of the key points of our chat was the complexities of working class experience that can be both joyful and painful. I think we've heard rather a lot about the painfulness, but I think it's really important to think about the joy. We discussed how the cultural resources of the academy are not inherently class, rather the access to them is. And Rancière has identified both scientific Marxism and cultural Marxism as complicit here in writing the working class being incapable of having any other thought than that which their mode of life imposed. In the first case, their emancipation thus requires an educated vanguard, where it goes. And the second tends to construe the working class locked in an organic fomentation of class consciousness incapable of being present at its own making in anything other than the reproductive mode. So, to summarise what I think is going on in the chapter is my struggle to make sense of the paradoxical affects and effects of finding yourself as the marked category, as I came to experience being classed more intensely when I went south into an elite university. Shifting class through education and the capital it potentiates carries the risk of a performance malfunction. You could be caught out. But two, I was determined, and I still am, not to argue that the other capitals I brought from home were worth less. There is something about the fund that become recovered, that can be recovered in some circumstances, and it's rare and rarely spoken about, but it's surely part of the legacy we bring, you bring, from the working class into the academy. An instinctive, persistent, deep-rooted anti-pretentiousness critique. Now, this particular fantasy of transcendence is a desire, I think, only made palpable and possible by one who has left, in inverted commas, her class of origin. But as anyone who reads the literature of class knows, you can never transcend the emotional weight. Bear with me. Hold the thought, I'm good. The emotional weight of knowledge that comes in the form of familial class experiences, values, and assumptive world. My last lecture at my retirement celebration was an effort to turn this working class, in inverted commas, back to the world they had become so invested in. There's a world to parody here, an A to Z, a veritable lexicon of pomposity. And I think it's good mental health to keep your ironic distance from the conditions of your own neoliberal subsumption, and also as a means to prevent falling over into cynicism. You know, we do matter. Class matters. Feminist working class matters. Lots of things matter. And we have been mattering, as well as mindering. A vital aspect of the intention behind the volume and my and Sarah and Daniel's writing and reflection is to accord agency, complexity and respect to the working class other, to refuse the shame as being seen as the only one having an accent, even as I know I can only do this from the luxury of academic discourse and through access to conceptual capital publishing audience and voice. Who else but working class, ex-working class feminist sociologists can write about being ex-working class and trade it in as some sort of authentic or academic cachet?
So while trying to catch up with this reflection on class and reification, what I see is a recalcitrant desire from Valerie to acknowledge pleasure. Pleasure here is not just a perverse force propagated through the circulation of visibilities and affectivities that resonate with popular economies of fantasies, but also I think that it is a potential for occasions of emancipation. Pleasure can be an effective strategy against attempts of defining working class and non-masculine dominant subjects as lack or abject. In this sense, to me, an actual title of Valerie's chapter would be reversed and actualized to something like Working Class Comforts, Insurgent Northern Accents. There is a pleasure when resisting being co-opted by middle-class hierarchies. Even if navigating between two languages of class is exhausting, as Valerie recognized, there is nonetheless an emancipatory pleasure when switching from middle-class vocabulary to working-class accent and parody. In my interpretation of this mode of thinking, a theorizing of class can be seen as a fearless speech on class through the encounter and insurrection of subjugated knowledge, knowledges found in the non-commonsensical wisdom that working class people have, and in feminist knowledges on culture found in scholarly critiques of power. These subjugated knowledges have the power to expose disagreements, often made marginal or co-opted by civilizing and commodifying ordering of knowledge circulation. Valerie's politics of discourse on class, I think, that cracks the assumed orderings and hierarchies of class. In Valerie's thinking, this is made in a carnivalesque spirit, embodying a kind of trickster subjectivity emerging from subalternity. When reading the book and Valerie's chapter, one of the challenges I encountered is related to the actual possibilities within and beyond the academy to use a clear working class location and attachment as a politics of theorizing and struggle. Valerie locates herself in a clear and proud working class belonging. Today, even a dominant middle-class progressive discourse portrays the working class as a threat to democracy and cultural modernization through the production, access, and use of Enlightenment technologies, such as the British Attitude Survey. This survey produces representations of working class people as in favor of death penalty and against immigration or homosexuality. For example, in these Brexit times, this public class engage sticks to individual responsibilization of working class, not just for educational and economic underachievement, but also for the democratic and cultural crisis of British society. Amid this intensification and demonization of working class lives, it becomes even more tricky and difficult to identify within working class culture as claiming to value and knowledge, and they're claiming to value and knowledge. In this context, works like this book are even more necessary, I think, to identify points of discontinuity within the attempts to reinstate order. Finally, to me, both Valerie and Sarah's work remind us that we can and should go beyond Audre Lorde's powerful assertion, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Rather, we can dismantle the deeper assumption that the tools, the ontological, epistemological, and material power are never intrinsically properties of the master in the first place. Just like working class lives are never the master's other, like the slave or the apprentice. Refusing to be the other, claiming clearly, I am not your other, can be a pleasurable and vital game against reification.
Closing points. Thank you for your attention. It's a long time to sit. In this presentation, we have thus identified the salience of effect and the tendency to reify working class culture as significant in our formulation of resistant or querulous alternative theoretical intuitions. As Daniel and Sarah have expanded, and we have, in our discussion, it couldn't all fit into this format. For place is local, global, transnational, migratory, leisured, consumed, staked, invaded, attacked, and defended. And my space was originally seeming very local. Part of our intent has been to invent or imagine or invite some new vocabulary for understanding the doing of higher education and the doing of working class people in higher education. And this work remains unfinished, not least because there is a lot of work to do on the value of working class experience, life and history. The dominant appeal of Bourdieu for sociology is understandable given the force, power and analytic depth of his work. But I think we prefer the mode of thinking that is perhaps less burdened with the analytic way and task of explaining reproduction. We may err more on the side of recentering the social on plurality, gaps and so forth. And Picasso said, all finished paintings are dead paintings, maybe all tidy ideas are dead ideas, by analogy.